We all wonder what tomorrow holds, don't we? It's just this human thing trying to peek ahead to get some control, maybe, or just comfort. It's powerful. So today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, why we're so drawn to predictions, premonitions, all of it. We're going to unpack why we look for these glimpses, whether they come from some modern oracle or even scientific research.
Yeah, and to help us navigate this, we've got a couple of really compelling sources lined up. First, there's this great YouTube video. It looks at the claims of a really famous fortune teller, Laila Abdellatif, with a good dose of humor, but also some sharp points. Then we switch gears to something more serious, a historical case study, actually, the Aberfan disaster in Wales. And this pretty ambitious project called the Premonitions Bureau that an English psychiatrist set up afterwards. It's quite a story.
Okay, so our mission here is to pull out the key insights. How are these predictions actually made? Or maybe more importantly, how do we perceive them being made? We want to get into the psychology, like why do we believe and what does it all say about us? And, well, the unknown. So let's get started. Let's talk about that allure of the oracle first. Laila Abdellatif. The YouTube video discusses her claims, right? Getting these snapshots of the future. How does it describe that?
Right. So she claims she gets these visions, these sort of snapshots while she's asleep. And what's interesting is how specific some predictions seem after the fact, once something happens. Like, she's credited with predicting an accident involving Aberfan and also an Iranian plane crash. But the big one, maybe, was the divorce of Yasmin Abdelaziz and Ahmed El-Wadi, very public figures. The video even has this kind of amusing clip where the actors almost seem to be pushing back against the prediction, like being extra affectionate in public after she mentioned divorce, trying to defy it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but then just a few weeks later, they announced their divorce anyway.
Wow. That timing certainly adds to the mystique, doesn't it?
It really does. It almost feels scripted for maximum impact.
But the source, the video, it uses an analogy to try and explain this idea of seeing the future, right? The tent on the mountain. Can you break that down?
Absolutely. That analogy is, I think, really helpful. It gets at this potentially mind-bending idea that maybe time isn't just this straight line we're all walking on. Imagine you're inside a tent, right? And you've only got this tiny hole to look through. You see just a little piece of the road outside. But someone's standing on top of the tent. They see the whole road. They see a car coming way before you do. And they see it after it passes your little peephole.
Ah, okay. So from their perspective.
Exactly. From their perspective, the cars past, present, and future on that stretch of road are all kind of visible at once. They have a different viewpoint.
It's less about predicting and more about perceiving time differently. That's a big conceptual leap.
It is. And the source suggests this analogy is like a simplified way to hint at much deeper ideas. Things from theoretical physics, questioning linear time, even pop culture references, like the three-eyed raven in Game of Thrones, who seems to see all time.
Right, right. It's about a different kind of seeing.
Exactly. The source even mentions some parallels in Islamic research, referencing certain Quranic verses or Sufi concepts like al-Mazub, someone who supposedly receives divine insights but gets overwhelmed by them.
Okay, but let's be real. The immediate reaction for many, myself included, is skepticism. Charlatans, right. The source addresses that up front, doesn't it? The idea that it's just luck.
Oh, absolutely. That's the first counter-argument raised, that people like Abdellatif make tons and tons of predictions. Most are forgotten. But then, just by chance, a few seem to hit the mark. And those are the ones we hear about, the ones that get amplified. It's a numbers game, essentially.
Okay, that makes sense. Which brings us to the other source, the Aberfan disaster. This is a much heavier story. October 21st, 1966, in Wales. This coal waste tip, it collapsed after heavy rain, right?
Yeah.
And buried a school.
Yes, it was just horrific. A massive landslide of coal waste killed 144 people, and tragically, most of them were children in that school.
Terrible. And this event caught the attention of a psychiatrist, Dr. John Barker.
That's right. Dr. John Barker. He was part of the British Society for Psychical Research, already interested in premonitions. And he started hearing these strange little stories around Aberfan, like a school bus that was late because of fog that morning, so the kids on it were safe. Or this heartbreaking story of a child who died, who had apparently told their parents they felt sick and didn't want to go to school that exact day. Things like that.
Wow. So those anecdotes spurred him on.
They did. He decided to investigate more formally. And his method was pretty unique for the time. He actually placed an advertisement in the Evening Standard newspaper.
An ad? What did it ask for?
It asked for anyone who felt they'd had a dream, a daydream, any kind of precognitive experience related to the Aberfan collapse to contact him.
And did people respond?
You got 76 responses, which, is quite a number.
76. Were there any really striking ones?
Definitely. There was a 63-year-old man who claimed he dreamt the word Aberfan 2 nights before it happened. And he said he'd never heard the word before, didn't know what it meant until he heard the news on the radio.
That's eerie.
Right. And another man reported having this really strong internal feeling that Friday morning, a sense of impending natural disaster. He even mentioned it to his secretary, apparently, said something is going to happen today.
Incredible stories. So Barker didn't just collect these, he did something with them.
Yes, this is where it gets really ambitious. Inspired by these responses, he set up the Premonitions Bureau.
The Premonitions Bureau, what was the goal?
The goal was audacious, to systematically collect premonitions from the public, filter them, analyze them, and ultimately try to prevent future disasters based on these warnings.
Wow. Trying to actually use premonitions predictively to save lives? But wait, there's a catch, isn't there?
There is. A big one. The source calls it the logical paradox of the Bureau. Think about it. If the Bureau successfully predicted a disaster and steps were taken to prevent it,
then the disaster wouldn't happen.
Exactly. So the prediction would technically fail, which would make the Bureau look like it wasn't working, even if it had just achieved its most important goal.
Huh. That's a brilliant point. A real catch-22. Did they have any cases that seemed like near misses or maybe hits?
Well, there's one particularly dramatic case they highlight involving a man named Alan Hencher. He submitted a really specific prediction. He called about a French Caravelle plane crash. He gave details like 123 to 124 people on board, only one survivor, and said the trouble would happen shortly after takeoff over mountains. Very specific.
Okay, that is specific. And what happened?
About a month later, a plane did crash. It was a British Britannia, not a French Caravelle. It crashed in Cyprus. There were 130 people on board, so close to his number, but there were 4 survivors, not 1. And the crash happened during landing, not takeoff.
Ah, so quite a few key differences, actually.
Significant differences, yes. Different airline, different plane type, different number of survivors, different phase of flight. But despite all that, the newspapers ran with it. Headlines like, "The Man Who Dreamed of the Disaster."
Right. They focused on the similarities, plane crash, similar passenger count, and maybe glossed over the differences.
Pretty much, which is a perfect lead-in to the next point.
Yeah, the Hencher case really highlights this issue of discrepancies, doesn't it? Yeah. Are those differences just marginal, as the source might ask, or are they fundamental?
And this is where we get into the psychology of it all. The source introduces this idea of post-diction.
Post-diction. So predicting after the event.
Sort of, yeah. It means we tend to only really notice or remember a prediction after something happens that seems to fit. Then our brains work backwards, connecting the dots, emphasizing the similarities, and often ignoring or downplaying the parts that didn't match, or forgetting all the predictions that never came true at all.
Okay, so our memory is kind of retrofitting the prediction to the event.
Exactly. We can see this really clearly if we look back at Laila Abdellatif's predictions through this lens. Remember her late 2023 prediction about a plane incident will ignite the world?
Vague. Okay.
Very vague. But then, in May 2024, the Iranian president's plane crashed. And suddenly, people linked her prediction to that specific event.
Ah, I see. Making the connection after the fact.
Precisely. Or, another example, June 2023, she predicts explosions targeting a hospital, rockets from the air, in a war-torn country. Global media. Again, quite general terms for modern conflict. But then, in October 2023, the tragic incident at the Al-Ali Baptist Hospital in Gaza occurred.
And people connected her prediction to that.
Widely connected, yes. The public made the link retrospectively.
Okay, so the source identifies some key reasons why this happens, why these vague predictions seem so potent after an event.
Yes, it boils down to about 3 main observations. First, there's this, let's call it a sweet spot for predictions. They often focus on events that are, statistically speaking, likely enough to happen somewhere, sometime, but are also dramatic enough to be newsworthy.
Like plane crashes, train accidents.
Exactly. Or explosions, protests, wars, even natural disasters in vulnerable areas. Things that sadly do happen with some regularity. The source uses Japan as an example. Predicting a natural disaster in Japan in any given year has a reasonably high chance of coming true, just based on geology and history. It sounds specific, but it's playing the odds.
Okay, so predict likely but newsworthy events. What's the second observation?
The sheer volume of predictions and how quickly the failed ones are forgotten. Figures like Abdellatif make countless predictions. Many are incredibly vague, most just don't happen. Or they're so ambiguous you could argue either way. But we don't track the misses. We only remember the apparent hits. The source points out, for instance, that Abdellatif predicted peace and stability for Palestine 3 years ago.
Clearly not a hit that gets remembered.
Not really, no. It gets overlooked because it starkly contrasts with reality. The misses just fade away.
Makes sense. And the third point.
Strategic vagueness, especially with timing. This is crucial. Predictions often say this year, or soon, or give no time frame at all. This means a prediction that hasn't happened yet isn't necessarily wrong.
It's just not yet.
Exactly. It keeps the prediction alive indefinitely. Think about predictions regarding, say, major discoveries on Mars, or the return of pandemics, or big economic booms for specific countries. The source contrasts these vague, positive predictions, like Tunisia becoming the next Dubai, or huge growth for Saudi Arabia and Egypt, with the more obvious prediction for Lebanon's continued instability. That one seems plausible because, sadly, it reflects the ongoing reality.
Okay, so if it's not always real foresight, and our brains are doing this post-diction thing, focusing on likely events, forgetting failures, and dealing with vague timing, why are we still so fascinated? Let's get into the deeper reasons, the psychology, the sociology behind why we seem to need predictions, horoscopes, fortune-telling.
This is really where you see the human element shine through, especially when you look historically. Consider this. The very first daily horoscope column appeared in a London newspaper, the Sunday Express, in August 1930.
1930. Wait, that's
Right after the 1929 stock market crash, right at the start of the Great Depression.
a time of massive uncertainty and anxiety.
Exactly. People were desperate for any sense of comfort, reassurance, or predictability when their world felt like it was falling apart. And we saw echoes of this more recently. The source mentions a surge in interest in astrology in India during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Same pattern. High anxiety, high uncertainty leads to a greater search for answers or control.
So it's a coping mechanism for uncertainty.
That seems to be a huge part of it. A Finnish psychology professor, Marianne Lindemann, identified two key functions these things serve. First, there's self-validation. Astrology, for example, helps people build a sense of who they are. The descriptions are usually positive, quite general. You're ambitious, you dislike routine. Lots of people can see themselves in that.
The Barnum effect, kind of.
Precisely. It feels personalized, it confirms your self-concept, and this can even become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
If you're told from a young age, oh, you're a typical Aries, very headstrong, you might actually start acting more in line with that expectation over time.
Interesting. So it shapes identity. What's the second function Lindemann identified?
Coping with stress and anxiety. This ties back to the historical examples. Her research back in 1998 actually showed a direct link. University students who reported more recent stress, family problems, money worries, social issues also showed increased interest in astrology.
So the more stressed you are, the more appealing it becomes.
It seems so. The feeling of predictability, even if it's just from a horoscope, can provide a sense of control. It helps people cope. It makes them feel like, okay, maybe things will get better, or at least I can understand why things are so chaotic right now. It's a psychological anchor in a storm.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground here, from, these mystical sounding visions and the tent analogy, all the way to that historical Premonitions Bureau experiment, and now deep into the psychology of why we even care about this stuff. It's been quite the deep dive.
It really has.
Yeah.
And I think what emerges is that our fascination with predictions isn't just one simple thing. It's this complex cocktail of really fundamental human desires, isn't it? We crave security. We want some control over our lives, or at least the feeling of control. We want to avoid that gnawing anxiety of not knowing what's next. And maybe just as importantly, we're trying to figure out who we are in the midst of all this chaos, building an identity.
That sums it up really well. It touches on so many core human needs. So maybe the final question to leave everyone with, something the source itself raises, is this. Are these things, this belief in predictions, horoscopes, whatever form it takes, ultimately harmful or helpful? Do they hold us back, maybe prevent us from taking action to change our reality? Or do they just offer some comfort, some psychological support when we're facing things that feel, well, completely out of our hands? Something to think about.